Good morning, and welcome to Northwest Unitarian Universalist Congregation. I'm Ariana Abel, this morning's worship associate, and it's my first time, so I'm sure I'll make some mistakes. We have our interim minister, the Reverend Kevin DeBeck, with us this morning, live streaming from our sanctuary. Eva Leventer, our acting director of religious education, is with the children and youth for a family service. Our choir director, Ken Hermanot, and our pianist, Alex Myers, continue to edit videos and provide tech support for Sunday morning services. Ben Gable, our congregational administrator and Zoom host, is with us this morning as well. If you are a visitor, welcome. We're glad you're here. If you'd like us to stay in touch with you, please fill out the visitor form that you'll see in the chat box below. The chat feature has been disabled, except for chatting directly with the tech host. So if you're having any problems with Zoom or question, use the chat function to talk to Ben, or you can use the Zoom raise hand function. We are all encouraged to change our pronouns on Zoom. To do so, you can use the three dots at the top right of your picture, or click the participant button at the bottom and hover over your name and change your name. Information about Northwest can be found on our website, northwestuu.org. We are emailed the newsletter with all the goings on of our congregation, but we're going to review them right now. We have COVID gathering guidelines. If the risk level is very high, only fewer than 10 people may gather in the church building. Right now, we're at severe risk level, so all indoor gatherings are suspended. To move from one risk level to another, there must be a 2-week downward trend in new COVID cases before allowing larger gatherings again. Any change in the size of gatherings allowed must be made by noon on the Wednesday preceding a Sunday morning worship service. And this will be communicated to you ASAP. This month's theme is cultivating relationships. So today's sermon will be on chosen families, and the religious education students will be learning about building bridges, not walls. Hey, y'all, we have a congregational meeting today at noon, so don't forget to log on for that. The link is in your email. All are welcome to attend, but only members may vote. Upcoming service topics are a deeper commitment to our principles and waiting for the great pumpkin. Our annual service auction is coming up. It not only raises lots of funds, but also lots of fun. Be sure to register. Those who pay the $25 donation price to attend will have a goodie bag delivered to your home prior to the event. We have a couple of upcoming youth program events to which all are welcome: a nature hike and a trunk or treat Halloween party. If you are a fully vaccinated woman and interested in attending a fall retreat in Milford, contact Amanda Spurrell. It's November 5 through 7. If you'd like to observe a board meeting, the next one will be November 11th. Or you can just hear about what happened by attending the Banter with the Board after the November 14th church service. Mark Babcock's beautiful quilt, a gift to our beloved retired minister, Kimmy, needs your signature. If you'd like to add your name, you can stop by the office on a Tuesday, Saturday, or Sunday between 10 and 2. I'd like to add that each month I host a Zoom spiritual support group on the month's topic, this month's being cultivating relationships. It's on the 4th Tuesday, so the next one will be October 26th. Contact me for more info or just click the link in the newsletter and we'd love to have you join us. Each year, Northwest and Birmingham Unitarian Church support a week to assist homeless folks in Oakland County with the South Oakland Shelter. SOS emphasizes on homeless prevention, sustainable housing solutions, and career development. Implements strategies and programs that provide realistic options for homeless and at-risk people seeking stabilization and self-sufficiency. Each month, Northwest shares 50% of the plate collections with a local charitable organization. Our social justice and outreach team has selected Oakland Forward as our October plate collection recipient. Their mission is to build power to remove economic, racial, and social barriers to provide opportunities for individuals with a focus on people of color in Oakland County. Text your donations. I think Kevin's going to introduce
Diana, thank you, Northwestern, for having Oakland Forward today. I think this is the first church to donate to our cause and mission. So you guys are the inaugural church. So I'm very excited about that. I'm going to talk to my pastor about doing something similar with some nonprofits. The mission of Oakland Forward is to build power by removing economic, racial, and social barriers to provide opportunities that include individuals of people of color in Oakland County. So the four major elements that we focus on all the time is voter education, also voter registration that we do all the time. Some of the national projects we're working on is paid leave for all. I think one of your members, Randy, works on that with us. And so he's doing a phenomenal job. And he just spoke about voter suppression. Also, one of the things that we do all the time is civic engagement. So we have a class of about 25, mostly young people between 18 and 35 right now, that we are training how to be civically engaged. So they've attended city council meetings, school board meetings. We just had them at the county last week and some others, learning the ropes on how to get involved and get engaged. And so I'm one of the co-founders of what was called the Pontiac Policy Council. And we started doing work in Pontiac, which is the poorest city in Oakland County, which is one of the richest counties in the United States. And what we learned from that work was when we started doing work in Royal Oak Township and Southfield and some other places, that we had pockets of people that needed that same help and needed that same removal of barriers. And so we founded Oakland Forward about 2 years ago, and I'm the executive director. And so we have did some work with COVID. We've given out over 100,000 masks so far since the pandemic started. One of the things I'm most proud of is we fed 2,000 seniors at the beginning of the pandemic, because we realized part of the pandemic problem was the isolation. So people were bringing them Meals on Wheels and other stuff, but we actually had one of our local restaurants cook them a good, what would be a Thanksgiving dinner, and brought it to them. And so we were very happy about that. But we believe in every election, every time, and getting people not only engaged in their local community, but trying to give them a tool in order to do it. And so when we work in other cities, not just Pontiac, we do a year-round community survey. And so our goal is to find out what that particular community needs, because it's not a cookie cutter solution to what we're doing, but find out what they need and then equip them with the tools and empower them to be able to change their own community. And so we sit on the Michigan Economic Justice Coalition with Trina, who's another member of your congregation. And so we are very excited that Oakland Forward was chosen. I think they gave me like 2 minutes as an elevator speech, but I could talk about this for 2 hours. So I'm going to turn it back over to Diana unless it's time for questions.
Good morning, everyone. My name is the Reverend Kevin DeBeck. My pronouns are he, him, and his. And our chalice lighting this morning is from Laura Thompson. And she says, "Across the distance, the light from within us shines, sending love to all. Across the distance, your light is fuel that warms me and helps to keep my own light burning. Together, we keep the flame of community burning bright."
Is it that calls you here, that calls you onward, that calls you inward, that leads you homeward? What is it that gives you the power to make change, to ask that question, to take that journey? What is it that says that you have done well, that asks you to learn more, that brings you to stillness, that holds you up in hard times? It is relationship, the beating heart of our faith. It begins when we share this hour, our truths, this air, our hearts. Come, let us worship together. Join in singing the hymn, "Love Will Guide Us," featuring the Northwest Singers.
Welcome to Storytime. Today I'm going to read Old Joe and the Carpenter an Appalachian tale of building bridges. Old Joe and the Carpenter is a story written by Pleasant L. Despain and first published in the spring of 1998 issue of Teaching Tolerance magazine. Old Joe lived out in the countryside, and he had one good neighbor. They'd been friends all their lives, and now their spouses were buried and their children raised. All they had left were their farms and each other. But for the first time, they had an argument. It was over a stray calf that neither really needed. It seemed as though the calf was found on old Joe's neighbor's land, and so he claimed it as his own. But old Joe said, no, that calf has been markings as my favorite cow, and I recognize it as being mine. Well, they were both a bit stubborn, so they just stopped talking to each other. It seemed that a dark cloud had settled over old Joe until there came a knock on the door 1 week later. He wasn't expecting anything, and he opened the door and he saw a young woman who had a box of tools over her shoulder. She had a kind voice and dark, deep eyes, and she said, I'm a carpenter and I'm looking for a bit of work. Maybe you'd have some small jobs that I can help with. Old Joe brought her to the kitchen and sat her down and gave her some stew that he had made on the stove. There also was a home-cooked bread, fresh churned butter, and homemade jam. While they were eating and talking, Joe decided that he liked this young carpenter. And he said, I do have a job for you. Look right there through the window. See that farm over there? That's my neighbor's. And you see that creek running right down through between the property lines? That creek, it wasn't there last week. My neighbor did that to spite me. He took his plow over there and he dug a big old furrow from Upper Pond and flooded it. Well, I wonder, if you could do better. Since he wants us divided that way, you go out there and build a fence, a big fence. So I won't even have to see his place anymore. And the carpenter said, well, if you have the lumber and nails, I got my tools, and I'll be able to build something that you'll like. Joe had to go to town to get some supplies, so he hitched up the wagon and showed the carpenter where everything was in the barn. The carpenter carried everything she needed down to the creek and started to work. The carpenter's work went smooth and fast. She did her measuring and her sawing and her nailing, and it was about sunset when old Joe returned and the carpenter had finished her work. When old Joe pulled up the wagon, his eyes opened wide and his mouth fell open. There wasn't a fence there at all. It was a bridge going from one side of the creek to the other. It had handrails, a fine piece of work, and his neighbor was just starting to cross the bridge and hold out his hand, and he was saying, Joe, you're quite a fellow to build a bridge. I've never been able to do that. I'm so glad we're going to be friends again. And Joe put his arms around his neighbor and said, oh, that calf is yours. I've known it all along. I want you to be my friend too. About that time, the carpenter started putting her tools in her box and then hoisted it onto her shoulder and started to walk away. And Joe said, wait, come on back, young carpenter. I want you to stay on. I have lots of projects for you. And the carpenter just smiled and said, I'd like to stay, Joe, but you see, I can't. I have more bridges to build. So she walked on. There ends our tale.
reading that will serve as text for my sermon today is from writer Nishan Panwar, and he says, "Real family does not come from your blood. It is the people standing beside you when no one else is." When you think of the word family, what comes to mind? Is it the group of people you were born into and perhaps even some that you grew up with? Or is it the friends that you made after your childhood and into adulthood? How we define what a family is depends on the culture that one has come from and how that idea has evolved over time. Now, the culture I know best is American culture. And for many decades, what the definition of a family was, it was a heteronormative couple who get together, get married, have children, and if they're lucky enough, grandchildren. And when their life is at an end, they are surrounded by those that they either raised or married into. And when our final breaths are taken, and we are sent to whatever awaits us in an afterlife, if there indeed is such a thing. It's quite a picture, isn't it? But that picture doesn't really represent our reality. And, maybe it never really did. The Soul Matters theme for October is cultivating relationships, and it's our perception and the realities of our relationships that have changed over time that is what I'm going to be talking about today. So first of all, some facts. In an article from Nautilus magazine titled "Families of Choice Are Remaking America" by Bella DePaulo, it was written in March of 2016, and it says, in 1950, 78% of households in the United States had married couples at its helm. More than half of those included children. The accepted wisdom was that in the post-World War II nuclear family style was the culmination of a long journey, the end point of changes in families that had been occurring for several hundred years. Sociologist John Scanzoni wrote in 2001. In my early adulthood, and perhaps many of you remember this as well, that politicians would decry the decline of the family unit and then they would blame everything from music to music videos to video games to whatever else they wanted to pin the fault on. And what was actually happening is that the definition of family was changing, both in what family looks like and who is even in one. Going back to that article from Nautilus, the writer further states that, fueled by a convergence of historical currents, including birth control and the rising status of women, increased wealth and social security, LGBTQ activism, and the spread of personal communication technologies and social media, more people are choosing to live alone than ever before. That's the end of that quote. The fact that many of those in politically powerful systems decry these changes speaks to the insidiousness of white supremacy. It's white supremacy that dictates one man and one woman. It's white supremacy that dictates that married couples should have children and are seen as strange or selfish if they don't. It's white supremacy that states that marriage is the goal and the best way to prove that one has reached adulthood. Popular culture is starting to reflect some of these changing norms, and one of the television shows, I'm a TV junkie, I will just admit it to you all, I love TV and I love watching shows, but one of the shows that I've seen recently that kind of reflects some of these changes is a show that is called Pose. It takes place in New York City during the AIDS crisis of the mid-'80s into the early '90s, and it demonstrates how families of choice can literally save lives. The show itself was groundbreaking as it had the largest cast of trans actors in any scripted series in television history. So the fact that they were using these people in this show was making history. While it took place in the decades of the '80s and early '90s, by telling stories of the families of choice that was created, it speaks to us today. And I would say the families of choice were created by those who were LGBTQ, who could not live safely in their families of origin, and of course, during the height of the AIDS crisis. In an article written by Corey Townsend on the website The Root from 2019, he says, the ways that we, meaning the LGBTQ community, are able to fill the gaps for one another in terms of resources that are imperative to our survival comes through our chosen families. Janet Mock, who was a writer and producer, added, "The practice of choosing our families is one that saved the lives of many of the LGBTQ plus space." Mock beautifully summarized that we come together in moments of tragedy to create something triumphant. Townsend goes on to say that Pose affirms that there is a power and healing that comes from supporting those whom we call family. Our chosen families have been instrumental in teaching us the right and wrongs of our community. They've kept us safe, provided us with love, and made us feel seen. And for that, we are all better people for it. And if you missed it when it was on, I believe it was broadcast on FX. I think it's on Netflix now if you want to watch it. There are other families of choice as well. Sometimes it can be a family of one. Families of one are also a trend that is on the increase, going back to that Nautilus article I mentioned earlier. Writer DePaulo states in this article, nearly half adults ages 18 and older are single. About 1 in 7 live alone. Americans are marrying later, divorcing in larger numbers, and becoming less interested in remarrying. According to the Pew Research Center, by the time today's young adults reach 50, a quarter of them will have never been married at all. The surge of singlehood is not just an American phenomenon. Between 1980 and 2011, the number of one-person households worldwide more than doubled, from 118 million to 277 million, and was projected to rise to 334 million by 2020. More than a dozen countries, including Japan and several European nations, now even have large proportions of solo dwellers than the US. Sweden ranks the highest at 50%. Individuals, not couples or clans or other social groups, are fast becoming the fundamental units of society. That's the end of that quote. Now, does this mean we're all going to become a world of people who live by themselves, stuck in their houses and only interacting on Zoom? Well, the short answer is no. Unless COVID surges again and puts us all back in lockdown. But DePaulo talks about this as well, saying, single people as a group spend more time connecting with and helping others than their married counterparts. Singles are more likely to do the same for their parents and their siblings. They also devote more time and resources for caring for aging relatives or friends who are sick, disabled, or elderly. These differences hold for people who have young children and those who don't. They're true for men and women, whites and non-whites, rich and the poor, and the employed and the jobless. Now, it's also been said that a church or a congregation can be a chosen family. Now, there are some churches that are small enough that that can be the truth, but here at Northwest, I think we're a little bigger than that. But that doesn't mean that as we as a community come together to worship and spread the good news of Unitarian Universalism, that some of the relationships that have formed here or in other UU churches around the country doesn't make it feel any less of a family of choice. Emma Merchant, who is a UU youth from Central Ohio, wrote on the UUA Worship Web about her experiences growing up in a Unitarian Universalist church. And these are her words. The thought that we are making a choice to be here in this family, in this community, is powerful. We have actively chosen to come and to be here. And I would even say, even if it's online, we have all made this choice to be together. I am not stuck with you because you're my cousin and I'm not allowed to be rude. I could leave if I wanted to, but I don't because of the way that we have been nurtured in this community. I choose to be stuck with you, which actually reminds me of a Huey Lewis song, for better or worse. And we have continuously made this choice over and over and over again. Every time we attend worship, every time we donate our time and energy, every time we clasp hands in meditation is a promise. I am here for you. The DNA of this community may be metaphorical, but it exists within me. The words covenant and right relation are second nature, placed on my tongue almost since birth, but they are words that I have chosen to bring into my life. My heart beats with the blood of this church, pounding out, I choose you, I am here. This is a safe place, a place of learning, a place of compassion, a space created by the very idea of love. We choose to build a sanctuary because we choose to be together. There is no use for a church of people who hate each other or a church of ghosts. So what is it that's at the core of us finding our families of choice? Why do we do these things that we do? At the base of all this, we humans need human connection to survive. In an article written on the USA website, written by Stephen Wolpert in August of 2013, he was reviewing a book written by Matthew Lieberman titled Social, Why Our Brains Are Wired to Connect. And in this article, he states, the book, which cites more than 1,000 published and unpublished studies, is the story of how 250 million years of evolution has produced major differences in the brain that distinguish us from our ancestors. That evolution ultimately has made today's humans more connected to the social world and more dependent on the social world. Mammals are more socially connected than reptiles, primates more than other mammals, and humans more than other primates. This is a quote from the book. Lieberman says that what this suggests is that becoming more socially connected is essential to our own survival. In a sense, evolution has made bets at each step that the best way to make us more successful is to make us more social. So it's literally hardwired into our brains that we need to connect with each other, especially when we've been rejected by our families of origin. Later in that same article, it states that the importance of social connection is so strong, Lieberman writes, that when we are rejected or experience other social pain, our brains hurt in the same way that we do when we feel physical pain. Social and physical pain are more similar than we imagine, Lieberman says. We don't expect someone with a broken leg to just get over it. Yet when it comes to the pain of social loss, this is a common and mistaken response. This is why the COVID pandemic has been so devastating. The virus is using our hardwired brains against us. This is why there are many churches, even some Unitarian Universalist churches, that are meeting in person despite the risk, because the risk of disconnection is almost more overwhelming than the risk of COVID. In fact, last year, as we were all on lockdown, the rates of drug overdoses increased by 29.4%. Human beings were never meant to live in isolation. Even with the introverts among us, human connection is the key to living a more human life. Now, I recall some years ago reading a book by Mary Pfeiffer, which, if you recall, her most famous work is called Reviving Ophelia, which detailed how society basically ruins our young girls and young women into thinking destructive thoughts. One of her other published works is titled Another Country, where she detailed how the isolation of older people, mostly elderly folks, lead to greater mental illnesses, and how the sole use of pharmaceuticals was not the way to combat this situation or combat the isolation. Her solution was to find ways for older people to interact with those who are not of the same age. And we're seeing this play out. There are countries in Europe that have taken this idea to heart, where retirement homes are also used as daycare centers so older folks can interact with younger children. It's a way to keep our minds sharp as we age. And the same goes for chosen families. We seek these connections to get the social support that maybe we didn't get from our families of origin. And in a sense, we all are part of a chosen family. Our families of choice may not look like how they did 50 and 60 years ago, but that doesn't make them any less valid. My last piece of advice to you all today is this. If you've lost touch with someone that used to mean something to you, and if you feel safe doing so, and that's a big caveat, if you feel safe doing so, reach out. Send them an email, shoot them a text, or if you're really old-fashioned, send them a card in the mail. By cultivating relationships with the family you were born into or not, you're helping to strengthen the bonds of humanity. Families of choice are as important as families of origin, and maybe even more so. They give us a sense of belonging and the knowledge that even at our worst, we are accepted somewhere. So, don't let the Hallmark and television commercials fool you. And may whatever family you choose help us all to be our best selves. Our closing hymn today is number 318, We Would Be One.
We would be one as now we join in singing our hymn of love to pledge ourselves anew to that high cause of greater understanding of who we are and what in us is true. We would be one in living for each other, to show to all a new community. We would be one in building for tomorrow a nobler world than we have known today. We would be one in searching for that meaning which binds our hearts and points us on our way. As one we pledge ourselves to great service, with love and justice strive to make us free.
Words today are from the Reverend Eric Williams, and he says, "May you be filled with the blessings of this covenanted community. May you carry them with you as you depart from here, wherever here is. May you discover the places in the world where these blessings are needed. May you have the courage to share them. May there be an open place within you to receive the blessings of the people whom you will meet along the way. Blessed be, and amen."